What society says about love is setting you up for failure. Hi, I'm Martin, and I've been a dating coach for over 17 years. And today we're going to talk about love and how what you think about love, and especially what we hear about love, really sets us up to have much more failure and pain in our relationships than we really need to. You know, like everyone, I grew up with this. I shouldn't say like everyone. Like many people, I grew up with the idea that I would find a nice woman to love me, and that it would just be something that happens. You know, you meet that person and bang, you know, it just seems wonderful and magical. My mom used to say to me, all you have to do is get a good job and a good woman will come and find you. Which is a very comforting story. The problem is that a lot of times growing up, you know, we hear this stuff and, you know, when we just believe it because, well, I mean, if you grew up, especially if you grew up in a really good family, you learn to trust the things that your parents tell you. And so you take this stuff in and you just carry it forward without thinking too deeply about it. And of course, when you don't have much experience, which is the situation a lot of my viewers are in, and certainly what the situation that I was in when I went to university, without much experience, I didn't really have anything else to go on other than these fantastical and very comforting ideas about love and relationships. Now, as I've gotten older and I've had more experience myself and worked with many guys over the years and seen them and worked with them as they went through their relationships, their marriages, their divorces, etc., it's clear that love is very, very different than what we're led to believe. You know, I was just before shooting this video, I was joking about how, you know, we have Leonardo DiCaprio who plays these roles like in Shutter Island, for example, where, you know, he has this deep, loving relationship for his wife and he's strongly affected by it. And so he plays this role. But then, you know, the real DiCaprio is on the yacht with a new 19-year-old, you know, every couple of months. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on DiCaprio. I can certainly understand that lifestyle selection. Not that I would ever do anything like that, of course. So anyway, you know, as I mentioned in my other video, I think 19-year-old women can cause a lot of problems. It's often better to go slightly older. But anyway, that's, you know, in another video. So, love. We tend to believe and want to believe that love can be this unconditional thing. And one of the things, obviously 50% of the population is, or actually maybe not 50%, more than 50% of the population is female. And because of that, they actually do have the experience of the appearance of unconditional love, whereas we don't. And so our perception is shaped by the female experience that's projected into society, even though it doesn't match up, generally speaking, with the male experience. And so that leads to a lot of confusion. You know, women can go into a bar, let's say, for example, or can go out to dinner. And it is possible that a handsome or maybe just a mediocre looking stranger would pay for a drink for them or do them any number of favors just because they're attractive women. And so while this is not unconditional love, it's not love at all, but the point is that because in the experience of women, there is kind of an unconditional appreciation, let's say. They get things unconditionally. They get help and assistance unconditionally. And so we have this idea that it's kind of because that sort of thing can be unconditional, that can carry forward. Men, of course, on the other hand, the chance of that happening is very, very rare. Now, I've had it happen a few times. I was just out a couple weeks ago and I was sitting at a dinner table and I was talking about investments, and the guy sitting next to me kind of overheard the conversation, and, you know, he asked me some questions about investing and stuff, and then he paid for dinner. Now, I mean, it wasn't expensive, but it was really shocking and I was very appreciative. Now, for guys, this is shockingly rare, right? How many times have I had someone who's essentially a total stranger pay for a meal for me? Maybe that's the first and only time. Now, I've had other people pay for meals for me, but those were guys who were clients of mine or maybe came to meet up with me for the purpose of getting some sort of advice, because I often meet up with people to see what their situation is. So, and by the way, if you're interested in working with me, then you can click on the link below and schedule a time to talk to someone on my team, and we can see about setting something up. But yeah, so in those situations, I also sometimes have someone who will pay for a coffee or a meal or something like that. A guy pay for me. You know, I mean, it's not entirely unheard of, but for women, they're turning the stuff down. You know, you can ask, if you know some attractive women, you can ask them how many guys offer to take them out for Valentine's Day. You know, I'm filming this the week after Valentine's Day. So ask, you know, an attractive woman how many guys asked her out. So she's turning down free meals. You know, when was the last time you turned down a free meal as a guy? So this idea of unconditional love is in the culture because to a certain extent, women experience it. Now, it's not to say that it doesn't exist at all for us. We can get unconditional love from our moms, especially, although, you know, if we're lucky, you know, I mean, many guys don't even get that. But that's about as far as it goes for us. So when you realize that that is not how it works, and that love is something that comes in two main ways, I would say. One, it comes from the experiences that you have with someone. So, for example, you know, you can think about the strong bonds that you can develop, even just among guys, from being on a team together, whatever kind of team that is, whether it's a sports or business or, you know, any volunteer program, you know, a social services program, doesn't matter. But when you work closely together with people towards a common goal, that can form a kind of love. But once again, I would not call that unconditional. It's conditioned on the fact that in that team, you contributed and performed at a certain level, right? Because if you didn't, then you would have gotten hazed, for example, and you potentially kicked out of that group. So, you know, you're kind of shunted to the outside of that group if you're not contributing to the degree that that group expects and thinks you should. So there's a level of required performance there. And the same thing comes with dating and relationships also, that with dating and relationships, through the shared experience of going through life together, there can be a certain love that develops. And you could call it kind of an appreciation of what you've contributed to that relationship over time. Right, so that's another way to think about love. But once again, this is not really a romantic form of love, right? It is a form of love, but not in the romantic way. And so there are plenty of guys who have that from their wives, but their wives don't want to sleep with them. Because while for us, we tend to think that those things should go together, for women, they don't necessarily. You know, there are plenty of women who say that they love their husband like a brother or like a son. That's not particularly good if they think of you as a son, by the way. But, you know, but the point is that they can see it as a different kind of love that doesn't include anything sexual. Okay, so that's the first kind of way of love. And I think that especially when you're married and you have kids, it's very easy for things to develop in that way, because it's becomes more difficult to focus on each other in the relationship when you're married and when you have kids, and you tend to focus more on the things that need to happen or that you think should happen to keep sort of the family going well, whether that's, you know, family trips, family outings, spending time with the kids, helping kids with their schoolwork, cleaning the gutters, all these sorts of maintenance things that kind of have to get done that show that you're invested enough in that family structure to make sure that it keeps functioning. That certainly is, you know, that first category of love that I was talking about. Now, that's one kind of love. Now, the other kind of love, which is the more romantic kind of love, comes from the things that you do that create a kind of emotional tension between you and that person. So when you think about what is romance in movies and TV shows, right? You see these kind of less mundane showings of, let's say, as a simple way, let's use like the 5 love languages conception. So you can see kind of extraordinary acts of service, right? So like when I used the example before of like fixing a clogged toilet in the house, it's like, yeah, she appreciates you for doing that, but also it's something that has to be done and someone has to do it. Romance is when you go beyond what is necessary and find things that are special and unique and that are not expected. Now, I'm not saying this always works. Plenty of guys do this stuff too, and it doesn't really lead to the romantic kind of love they want to have with their wife, because the whole dynamic with wives is very complicated. But going back to for those of you who are starting out in your relationships, or you're just dating, that love comes from the way you interact with them and from them feeling a strong emotional reaction to the things that you do. And so you have these two things, right? One is the appreciation, and the other is kind of the in the moment present experiences. So there's this isn't so common these days, but if you look at old movies from like the 80s, it was really common for guys to take girls to like dates to see like a horror movie, right? Or there were some experiments that were done where they had strangers approach women on the Brooklyn Bridge on a very windy day, so the bridge is kind of shaking a little bit. And they contrasted that with having the same guys approach women. And I think they did it with men too, men approaching women and women approaching men. But anyway, on a calm park bench. And the number of people who offered their phone number when asked on the Brooklyn Bridge was much higher. And the speculation was that the raised emotional experience that people felt by being on this bridge it's kind of more precarious, that enhanced emotional experience was attached to the person they interacted with. And because it was attached to the person they interacted with, they thought they were more into that person, when really they were more into, their emotions were heightened by that experience, and the person just happened to be there. And this is also what accounts for kind of more romantic feelings on trips and vacations, or people going on having summer flings. And there's a really interesting book that I read last year called How Emotions Are Created. Wait, I think that's how it goes. Anyway, we'll put the book up here so you can see what exactly the title of the book is, in case I got it wrong. And in that book, she tells the story. So she's a researcher who studies emotions and how humans generate emotions, how we think about emotions, how emotions function in society. And she talks about an experience that she had where she had a guy ask her on a date, and she felt really excited about it. And she said, I had, I had butterflies in my stomach. But later on realized that these butterflies in her stomach, which she thought were because of him, was actually the early stages of flu coming on. And after she recovered from the flu, she realized she wasn't really interested in this guy at all. Which brings me to a side point, but I'm going to throw it in here because this is an important thing to understand. As guys, generally speaking, whether we go on a date with, have sex with a girl, tends to fall into pretty much two metrics. How attractive is she, and how difficult does she make it, right? So it's like the less attractive she is, the easier it has to be, or we're not going to take the steps necessary, right? So for us, whether we go on dates with, have sex with a girl, pretty much is 100% up to her. Now, obviously, she can't really control how attractive she is, but she could definitely make it easier, right? So she has a lot of control. On the reverse side, as guys dealing with women, we don't have nearly as much control over whether the girl goes out with us or has a date with us or not. And that is something that, as guys, it's hard to remember or even to realize. For women, what we do has a much smaller effect on what she does. So if you meet a woman at the wrong time, right? This is a typical thing. Women say, oh, it's not a good time, right? For women, this is true. They will have all sorts of other things in their life that, are more important. I've had clients who their dog is sick. The girl, they want to take a girl out on a date. Their dog is sick, or their dog just died or something. And, now they don't want to go on a date because of that. Whereas, when I ask my clients, I say, oh, if you found out that your mom was extremely sick and you were going to go fly home tomorrow to see her, and an attractive girl called you up and said, hey, I know you're leaving tomorrow, can I come over tonight? You're not going to go, no, most guys don't go, well, no, I'm not really in the mood tonight, I feel really bad about my mom. they're going to say, come on over. This is going to raise my spirits before I have to go and deal with, my mom. Women, not so much. So we have to do our part. We have to do our best. And every mistake that we make in the way we interact with her reduces our chances of success. But we don't have control over what that chance of success is. So maybe, given the girl's situation, that chance of success is only, let's say, 40%. You have only a 40% chance of getting this girl to go on a date with you, or getting her phone number, or her, heading back to your place with you after a date. And every mistake or boneheaded thing that you said cuts that 40% chance down. It's like you have a hand of poker, and you can play that hand in many different ways, and there are better and worse ways to play it. And the worse you play it, the less your chance of winning. That's really how it is for us as guys. So anyway, when it comes to thinking about love as a guy, I don't really think that you should be focused on that at all. And you shouldn't be focused on whether a girl loves you or not. And the reason you shouldn't be focused on whether a girl loves you or not is because love is not an indication of the quality of the relationship. You can have a woman that is deeply, deeply in love with you, but because she's deeply in love with you, she does lots of destructive things in the relationship. Whereas you could have, because of, let's say, her insecurity, so there are many people that when they start to feel a deep attachment, that makes them feel so insecure that they start to do things to sabotage that relationship. Now, they don't think, oh, I'm going to sabotage this relationship, but they have patterns of behavior that they've learned over their life that they have not taken the time to examine and to realize that they are destructive behaviors, and they start to come out, and they can damage the relationship and make your life hell. And you can have another woman who loves you less, but is committed to the relationship, has a strong appreciation from you, and because of that is willing to make the relationship really great and contribute a lot. So you really have to consider that what you really want is a great life. And that feeling of love, that strong romantic feeling of love for you as a guy may not be it probably isn't the most important thing to be looking for.